Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto is summoned to DxD by the Gremory family for breeding? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unwilling Prize. The air in the Gremory clan's summoning chamber was thick with the scent of old blood and ozone. Rias Gremory stood at the epicenter of a complex array of glowing runes, her crimson hair a stark ash of color against the chamber's oppressive gloom. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the low, resonant chant of her brother, Seers X Lucifer, one of the four great Satans. This was a desperate gambit, a recourse she had fought against but ultimately had to concede. The pressure from the Council of Elders had become unbearable, their whispers of her, tainted, lineage, and the need for a powerful infusion of new blood a constant, grating chorus. Akano Himahima, her queen and closest friend, stood a few paces behind her, a strained smile on her beautiful face that did not quite reach her violet eyes. Kiba Yuto, her ever-loyal knight, had his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his handsome features drawn into a tight mask of apprehension. Kaneko Tuju, her rook, was a small, stoic statue of white-haired impassivity, yet the subtle twitch in her cat-like ears betrayed her inner turmoil. Even the oafish, yet good-natured Issei Hyodo, her newest pawn and the current Red Dragon Emperor, looked pale and nervous, his usual boisterous energy subdued. The ritual was ancient, forbidden, and incredibly dangerous. It was a summons that reached not just across their world, but across dimensions. A net cast into the infinite sea of realities with the bait of immense demonic power. They were not seeking a mere familiar, but a being of such prodigious strength. GTH that its union with the Gremory line would silence all talk of their family's decline. They were looking for a prize, a specimen, a powerful creature to be tamed and utilized. The word, breeding, had been used in the Elders' chambers. A cold and clinical term that had made Rias's stomach churn. Seers X's voice rose in pitch, the ancient demonic language a cascade of guttural commands and pleas to the void. The runes on the floor blazed with a searing, crimson light, and the air began to crackle with raw, untamed power. A vortex of swirling energy erupted in the center of the summoning circle. A tear in the fabric of reality itself. It was a maelstrom of screaming colors and discordant sounds, a chaotic symphony of 1,000 different worlds bleeding into one another. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The vortex collapsed, the light receded, and the chamber was plunged back into a ringing silence. In the center of the circle, where a moment before there had been a gateway to infinity, now lay a man. He was sprawled on his back, dressed in tattered black and orange clothing that seemed more suited for a battlefield than a demonic summoning chamber. His blonde hair was matted with dirt and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. He was unconscious, but even in repose, there was an undeniable aura of power emanating from him, a dense, palpable pressure that made the air feel heavy and thick. For a moment, no one moved. They had done it. The ritual had been a success. Relief, potent and overwhelming, washed through Rias. But as she took a hesitant step forward, her eyes fell upon the man's face. It was a young face, perhaps a few years older than her own, with strange, whisker-like marks on his cheeks. And even in unconsciousness, his features were tched with a profound and bone-deep weariness, the look of a soldier who had just walked away from a war that had claimed a piece of his soul. A flicker of unease, cold and sharp, pierced through her relief. "As that, him?" Issei whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of awe and fear. Seers X let out a long, slow breath, the tension draining from his powerful frame. "The ritual was a success. The power I can sense from him, it is immense, beyond anything I could have anticipated." Rias knelt beside the unconscious man, her hand hovering over his chest. She could feel the rhythmic beat of his heart, strong and steady. She could also feel the roiling ocean of energy contained within him, a power so vast and potent that it felt like standing on the shore of a raging sea. It was a wild and untamed power. But it was not demonic. It was something else entirely, something alive. As her fingers brushed against the fabric of his strange clothing, the man's eyes snapped open. They were a startling, vibrant blue, the color of a clear summer sky, and in their depths, Rias saw not confusion or fear, but an immediate and unnerving clarity. Naruto Uzumaki's first sensation was pain. A dull, throbbing ache that seemed to permeate every cell of his body. It was the familiar pain of a battle fought and won, the price of pushing his body and his chakra to their absolute limits. The last thing he remembered was the blinding light of the final, cataclysmic clash with Kagaya, the feeling of Sasuke's hand on his shoulder, and then, nothing. Now, he was lying on a cold, hard floor, Sarone. Dead by a group of people who were staring at him with a mixture of apprehension and expectation. He pushed himself up into a sitting position, his movements slow and deliberate, his senses on high alert. He catalogued his injuries, a few cracked ribs, a dozen or so minor lacerations, and a deep-seated exhaustion that went all the way down to his bones. Nothing he couldn't handle. He took in his surroundings. A large, circular room with a high, vaulted ceiling. Strange, glowing symbols etched into the floor. And the people, a man with crimson hair who radiated an aura of immense power, a woman with black hair and a disturbingly seductive smile, a handsome blonde boy with a sword, a small girl with white hair, a brown-haired boy who looked completely out of his depth, and a beautiful crimson-haired girl who was kneeling beside him, her face a mask of cautious curiosity. They were all powerful, he could sense that much. Their energy felt different from the chakra he was used to, heavier and with a strange, dark undertone. But it was power nonetheless. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice raspy from disuse. The crimson-haired girl, Rias, seemed taken aback by the question. "You were in the Gremory family's ancestral home. In the underworld." Naruto's eyebrows furrowed. "Underworld? Never heard of it. Is it a hidden village?" A flicker of confusion crossed Rias's face. "A hidden village? No, this is the realm of devils." Devils. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Naruto had faced down a literal goddess of destruction, so the idea of devils didn't particularly faze him. But it did raise a lot of questions. "And why am I here?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over the assembled group. This time, it was the powerful crimson-haired man, Sirzex, who answered. "We summoned you. We were in need of a being of great power to assist our family." The word, assist, was carefully chosen, but Naruto could read the subtext in the man's eyes, in the tense posture of the others. They hadn't summoned him for a friendly chat. "Assist how?" he pressed, his voice deceptively calm. There was a moment of awkward silence. Rias looked to her brother, a silent plea for him to handle this delicate situation. Sirzex cleared his throat. "The Gremory family is one of the pillars of the demonic world. It is our duty to maintain our strength, our lineage. We sought a suitable partner to ensure the future of our line." The pieces clicked into place in Naruto's mind. The strange ritual, the powerful but nervous people, the talk of lineage and strength. They had summoned him here for breeding. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the situation almost made him laugh. Almost. A cold, dangerous calm settled over him. He had fought and bled for his village, for his friends, for the entire world. He had earned his peace, his right to go home. And these people, these devils, thought they could just snatch him out of his own reality and use him like some prized stud horse. He slowly rose to his feet. His movements fluid and economical. The weariness was still there, a heavy cloak on his shoulders, but beneath it, a familiar, fiery energy began to stir. Kurama, his partner, his friend, was waking up. "You should probably tell them what a monumentally stupid idea this was," the great fox's voice rumbled in his mind, a low growl of amusement and irritation. "I plan on it," Naruto replied silently. He looked at the assembled devils, his blue eyes no longer just clear, but hard and sharp as chips of ice. The pressure in the room, which had already been considerable, suddenly intensified tenfold. It was no longer just the passive aura of a powerful being, it was a focused, directed wave of intent, a silent declaration of his will. Kiba and Issei took an involuntary step back. Akino's smile faltered. Kaniko's ears flattened against her head. Even Sirzex, one of the most powerful beings in their world, felt a flicker of genuine alarm. The energy rolling off this man was not just immense, it was ancient, primal, and utterly untamable. It was the power of a force of nature, of a raging storm and a sun-scorched desert, all contained within a single, defiant individual. "Let me get this straight," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerously quiet. "You dragged me from my home, from my friends, from a war that I just finished fighting, and you brought me here, to be a broodmare." The crude, dismissive term hung in the air, a stark and brutal summation of their intentions. Rias flinched as if struck. "That's a rather crude way of putting it," Sirzex said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Is it an inaccurate one?" Naruto countered, his gaze locking onto the Saiyans. Sirzex had no answer. "I am not a prize to be won," Naruto continued, his voice rising in volume. Each word laced with a power that made the very stones of the chamber vibrate. "I am not a tool to be used. And I am not your solution to a political problem." He took a step forward, and the glowing runes on the floor, which had been dormant since his arrival, suddenly flared to life, not with the crimson of demonic magic, but with a brilliant, golden light. It was his chakra, his life force. And it was pushing back against the demonic energy that saturated the room, cleansing it, overriding it. "You've made a mistake," Naruto said, his eyes now glowing with a faint, inner light. "A very big mistake." Sirzex, realizing that this situation was rapidly spiraling out of his control, made a split-second decision. He had to establish dominance, to remind this being of where he was and who he was dealing with. He raised a hand, and a sphere of crimson energy, the very essence of his power of destruction, coalesced in his palm. "I understand that you are upset," he said, his voice taking on a hard, commanding edge. "But you are in our world now. You would do well to remember that." Naruto didn't even flinch. He just looked at the sphere of destructive energy, then back at Sirzex, and a small, humorless smile touched his lips. "You want to compare power?" he asked, a genuine question. Before Sirzex could react, Naruto's hand shot out. He wasn't aiming for the Satan, but for the wall of the chamber. A small, blue sphere of swirling energy, no bigger than his fist, materialized in his palm. It was a Rasengan, a simple, elegant, and devastatingly powerful technique. He didn't throw it, he just pushed it. The Rasengan shot across the room, a silent, blue comet. It struck the far wall, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like tearing reality, the wall simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not shattered, but erased. A perfect, circular hole now looked out into the gloomy, perpetual twilight of the underworld, the edges of the hole smooth and almost polished. The silence that followed was absolute. Rias and her peerage stared at the hole, then back at Naruto, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, terrifying understanding. Sirzex's sphere of destructive energy dissipated, his hand trembling slightly. He had poured a considerable amount of his power into that sphere, enough to level a small mountain. But the casual, almost dismissive display of power from this stranger, it was on another level entirely. Naruto lowered his hand, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said, his voice once again calm and quiet. "Are we going to talk about how you're going to send me home, or do you want me to keep redecorating?" The stalemate that followed was thick with unspoken threats and a complete and utter reversal of power dynamics. The Gremory clan had summoned a being to be their prize, to be their solution. Instead, they had summoned a force that could very well be their undoing. The hunter had become the prey. The summoner was now at the mercy of the summoned. And as they all stood there, locked in a tense and uncertain standoff, a subtle tremor ran through the fabric of reality, a faint, almost imperceptible ripple that originated from the dimensional tear they had created. It was a tremor that went unnoticed by the devils, their senses attuned to the energies of their own world. But Naruto felt it. It was a faint, cold whisper from the void, a hint of a presence that was ancient, vast, and utterly alien. It was the first, faint echo of a storm that was gathering on a horizon they could not yet see. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Devil's Bargain, a Shinobi's Path. The air in the Gremory Mansion's grand parlor was thick with a tension that could have been cut with a kunai. Naruto sat in a plush, velvet armchair that felt ridiculously out of place beneath his tattered and blood-stained clothes. Across from him, Rias and her peerage were arranged on a long, ornate sofa, their expressions a mixture of apprehension, curiosity, and a healthy dose of fear. Sirzex stood by the large, Gothic window, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Naruto with a new and unsettling level of respect. The perfect, circular hole in the summoning chamber wall served as a stark and silent reminder of the power they were dealing with. So, Naruto said, breaking the strained silence, devils, huh? You're going to have to give me the condensed version. I've had a long day. Rias, taking her cue as the leader of her peerage, leaned forward, her hands clasped in her lap. She began to explain, her voice steady despite the tremor of unease that still lingered in her heart. She spoke of the three factions, devils, angels, and fallen angels, of the great war that had ravaged their world centuries ago, of the fragile truce that now held them in a delicate balance of power. She explained the peerage system, the evil pieces, the hierarchy of the demonic world, and the 72 pillars of the underworld's noble families. Naruto listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He absorbed the information without comment, his sharp, analytical mind piecing together the political and social structure of this strange new world. It was a world of gods and monsters, of ancient conflicts and rigid traditions. And in the middle of it all was the Gremory family, a powerful and respected clan facing a political crisis that had led them to this desperate, and ultimately foolish, course of action. When Rias had finished, Naruto nodded slowly. I see. So, you're a princess, and you're engaged to some guy you don't want to marry. And your solution was to summon a stranger from another dimension to knock you up and give you a powerful heir. Rias's face flushed a deep, crimson red, a color that clashed with her hair. When you put it like that, it sounds barbaric. Because it is, Naruto said, his tone blunt and uncompromising. You're lucky I'm not the type to hold a grudge. Otherwise, we'd be having a very different kind of conversation right now. The unspoken threat hung in the air, a potent and chilling reminder of the power he had so casually displayed. What are you? Issei asked, his voice barely a whisper. Are you a god? A monster? Naruto looked at the boy, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I'm a shinobi, a ninja from the Hidden Leaf Village. The answer seemed to confuse them more than anything. The concept of a ninja, a human warrior, wielding such immense power was completely foreign to them. A human, Kiba said, a note of disbelief in his voice. The power we felt from you, it's greater than anything I've ever encountered. It's called chakra, Naruto explained simply. It's the life force that flows through every living thing in my world. I just have a lot of it. That was, of course, a massive understatement. But it was the simplest explanation he could offer. So, what do you want? Sirzex asked, his voice cutting through the chatter. It was the question that had been weighing on all their minds. Naruto held all the cards. He could demand anything, and they would be hard-pressed to refuse. Naruto leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping over the assembled group. He could see the fear and uncertainty in their eyes, but he could also see something else. He saw a group of people bound together by loyalty and affection, a family, however unconventional. It reminded him of his own team, his own precious people. I want to go home, he said simply. But I get the feeling it's not going to be that easy. Sirzex shook his head. The ritual you were summoned with was a one-way street. It was designed to bring a being here, not to send one back. To open another gateway of that magnitude would require an immense amount of power and a deep understanding of dimensional travel, something that even our most powerful mages do not possess. Naruto's jaw tightened. He had expected as much. So, I'm stuck here. For the time being, yes, Sirzex admitted. A heavy silence descended on the room. Naruto's mind raced. He was a stranger in a strange land, a world with its own rules, its own dangers. He was alone, cut off from everything he had ever known. A lesser man might have despaired, might have raged against the unfairness of it all. But Naruto Uzumaki had faced down gods and monsters, had stared into the abyss of hatred and despair and had chosen to believe in the light. This was just another challenge, another obstacle to overcome. All right, he said, his voice firm and decisive. New plan. You all dragged me into your mess. The least you can do is help me find a way back. In the meantime, I'll need a place to stay, and I'll need to understand this world better if I'm going to survive in it. Rias looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. You'll stay with us, of course. You will be a guest of the Gremory family. Naruto nodded. Fine, but let's be clear about one thing. I am not your pawn. I am not your weapon. And I am most definitely not your breeding stock. He said the last words with a look of such utter disdain that Rias winced. I am your ally, he continued. I will help you with your political problems. With this Riser Fennec's character, on one condition. What is it? Rias asked, her voice eager. You and your peerage will help me in my search for a way home. You will give me access to your libraries, your scholars, your resources. We will work together, as equals. It was a far more reasonable offer than any of them had expected. Sirzex looked at his sister, who nodded in agreement. We accept your terms, Rias said, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time since Naruto's arrival. And so, a new and unlikely alliance was forged, a devil's bargain made with a shinobi's path. The next few days were a crash course for Naruto in the ways of the underworld. He devoured the books in the vast Gremory library, his ability to create shadow clones allowing him to absorb centuries of knowledge in a matter of hours. He learned of the sacred gears, the powerful artifacts bestowed upon humans by the god of the Bible, of the intricate and often deadly politics of the devil nobility, and of the myriad of other supernatural beings that inhabited this world, vampires, werewolves, yokai, and more. He also began to interact with Rias's peerage, to see them not just as powerful devils, but as individuals. He saw the quiet strength and fierce loyalty of Akeno, the unwavering devotion of Kiba, the stoic and surprisingly gentle nature of Kaneko, and the boundless, if often misguided, enthusiasm of Issei. He saw a family, and he found himself, much to his own surprise, starting to care for them. In turn, they began to see the man behind the immense power. They saw his unwavering determination, his fierce loyalty to his own ideals, and his surprising capacity for kindness and humor. He was a leader, not through birthright or title, but through the sheer RCE of his personality and the undeniable strength of his convictions. The first test of their new alliance came a week after his arrival. A report came in of a stray devil terrorizing a small, remote town in the human world. It was a minor threat, something Rias and her peerage could have easily handled on their own. But Naruto insisted on coming along. He wanted to see this world's combat firsthand. They arrived in the town to find a scene of chaos and destruction. A grotesque, multi-limbed creature was rampaging through the streets, its demonic energy a foul and corrupting presence. All right, Rias said, her crimson aura flaring to life. Kiba, you take the front. Akeno, provide support from the air. Kaneko, wait for an opening. Issei, I've got this, Naruto said, his voice calm and confident. Before any of them could react, he was gone. He moved with a speed that was almost impossible to follow, a blur of orange and black. He appeared directly in front of the stray devil, his hand already forming the familiar swirling sphere of the Rasengan. The devil, sensing the immense power of the attack, let out a terrified screech and swung its multiple limbs in a desperate attempt to defend itself. But it was too slow. Naruto slammed the Rasengan into the creature's chest, and with a deafening roar, the stray devil was obliterated, its demonic form completely disintegrated by the raw, untamed power of the attack. The entire battle had lasted less than 10 seconds. Rias and her peerage stared in stunned silence. They had seen his power before, but to witness it in a real combat situation was something else entirely. It was not just the raw, overwhelming force of his attack, but the speed, the precision, the sheer, effortless efficiency of his movements. He was a warrior, a master of his craft, and in that moment, they all understood that the gap between their power and his was far greater than they had ever imagined. As they stood there, a strange sensation prickled at the back of Naruto's neck. The same cold whisper he had felt in the summoning chamber. He looked around, his senses on high alert, but he could see nothing out of the ordinary. Did you feel that? He asked, his voice low. Feel what? Rias asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Naruto shook his head. Nothing. It's probably just my imagination. But he knew it wasn't. It was the same feeling he had gotten right before Kagaya had appeared, the feeling of a presence that was not of their world, a power that was ancient, alien, and vast beyond comprehension. It was a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the fabric of reality. A harbinger of something far more dangerous than stray devils or arrogant nobles. It was a threat that was still hidden in the shadows, a storm that was still gathering on a distant horizon. But it was coming, and Naruto had a sinking feeling that he, and his new, unlikely allies, were standing directly in its path. Unbeknownst to them, in a remote and desolate corner of the world, a team of high-ranking exorcists from the church were investigating a strange phenomenon. A small, forgotten shrine had been completely obliterated, not by demonic or fallen angel power, but by a surge of holy energy so pure and so potent that it had left the very ground scorched and barren. In the center of the crater, all that remained was a single, strange symbol, etched into the bedrock as if by a divine hand. It was a symbol that none of them recognized, an ancient and forgotten sigil that spoke of a power that predated their god, a power that was about to reawaken. And it was a power that viewed the current inhabitants of the supernatural world as nothing more than a plague to be cleansed. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Arrogance of Immortality. The Training Grounds B. Behind the Gremory estate were a sprawling expanse of scorched earth and shattered rock, a testament to years of demonic power being honed and unleashed. For the past week, however, it had become Naruto's classroom. And the lessons were unlike anything Rias's peerage had ever experienced. He was relentless, a whirlwind of focused energy who pushed them past their perceived limits and then demanded more. He had dismantled their entire approach to combat. Kiba, for all his demonic speed, was predictable. Naruto, without even using his full power, danced around the knight's sword strikes, his movements fluid and unpredictable. He used feints, misdirection, and subtle shifts in his footing to leave the prodigy swinging at empty air. Speed is useless if you telegraph every move, Naruto stated calmly. Parrying a desperate lunge from Kiba with the back of his hand and tapping him lightly on the forehead. A real fight is won here, he added, tapping his own temple, not with your feet. O's powerful lightning attacks were met not with brute force, but with cunning. Naruto taught her to see the atmosphere itself as a weapon, to feel the buildup of static electricity, the subtle shifts in temperature. He showed her how to weave smaller, faster attacks into her larger barrages, creating openings that couldn't be defended against. During one session, he created a single, tiny Rasengan, and in his palm and held it against her most powerful lightning bolt. The two forces met and, instead of a cataclysmic explosion, Naruto's swirling chakras simply absorbed and dissipated her attack, the raw energy grounding harmlessly into the earth. Control is more important than power, he told her, the scent of ozone thick in the air. An avalanche is powerful, but a single, well-placed needle can be far more deadly. For Kaneko, whose quiet strength and mastery of senjutsu mirrored some of his own sage mode abilities, his lessons were more esoteric. He taught her to feel the life force of the world around her. Not just as a source of power, but as an extension of her own senses. He had her fight him blindfolded, forcing her to rely on the vibrations in the ground, the subtle stirrings of the air. The very breath of her opponent. She was a natural, her instincts honed and sharp, and under his guidance, her small frame began to move with a predatory grace that was truly terrifying. Issei was the most challenging student. The boosted gear was an artifact of immense, almost limitless potential, but its wielder was still a teenager driven by hormonal impulses. Boost, 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 he would scream, pouring raw power into a straightforward punch that Naruto would sidestep with almost contemptuous ease. And then what? Naruto asked after one such failed attempt, watching as Issei gasped for breath. The backlash of his own power leaving him drained. You've put all your energy into one big, dumb attack. Now you're tired, and I'm still standing. You're not a cannon, Issei. You're a fighter. Think. Use that power to enhance your speed, to create diversions, to outlast your opponent, not just to hit things harder. He began training Issei in taijutsu, in the basic hand-to-hand combat that was the foundation of any shinobi. The progress was slow, frustrating, but for the first time, Issei began to see the power of the Red Dragon Emperor as more than just a divine sledgehammer. Throughout these sessions, a strange feeling would occasionally wash over Naruto. It was like a flicker of static in his senses, a momentary distortion of the world around him. The air would feel thin. The colors of the underworld sky would seem to pale, and a profound, unnatural chill would seep into his bones. It was the cold whisper from the void, growing slightly in intensity each time he felt it. There it is again, he muttered during a break, looking up at the crimson sky. "What is it, Naruto-kun?" Akino asked, handing him a bottle of water. "It's hard to explain. It feels like something is watching. Something that isn't from this place. Perhaps it is a consequence of your summoning," Kiba suggested. "Your very presence might be causing a disturbance between worlds." Naruto considered it, but shook his head. "No, this feels different. It's not a disturbance. It's a presence. It feels hungry." The others exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them could feel what he did. To them, the world was as it always was. The conversation was cut short by the sudden, intrusive flare of a transportation circle on the main lawn. A pillar of fire erupted, and from it emerged a group of figures. The man at their lead was tall and slender, with blonde hair styled in a way that screamed arrogance. He wore flamboyant, expensive-looking clothes and carried himself with the Unshikaya confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in his life. This was Riser Phoenix. Behind him stood his peerage, 15 beautiful women in matching maid outfits, each of them radiating a quiet and well-trained power. Riser's eyes immediately locked onto Rias, who had instinctively moved to stand in front of her peerage. A possessive, smug smile spread across his face. "Rias, my darling, Riser has come to visit his beautiful fiancée. And I see you've been playing with your little pets." His gaze flickered over Akino, Kiba, Kaneko, and Issei with dismissive contempt, before finally landing on Naruto. His eyes narrowed. "And what is this? A new stray you've picked up? A human, by the smell of it. How utterly pathetic." Naruto didn't react. He simply took a slow sip of his water, his blue eyes watching the scene unfold with a detached, analytical calm. This was Rias's problem, and he wanted to see how she would handle it. "Riser," Rias said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Your visit is unannounced and unwelcome. State your business and be gone." Riser laughed, a high, grating sound. "My business is you, my sweet. Our wedding day approaches, and Riser wishes to spend some time with his bride-to-be. You can't keep running from your duty to your family, Rias. It is time to accept your fate." He took a step forward, his hand reaching out to stroke her cheek. Rias recoiled as if from a snake. "I will never marry you," she hissed, her crimson aura of destruction beginning to swirl around her. Riser's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. "Still so defiant. Your pride will be the ruin of your family. The elders are already whispering. The Gremory line is weak, they say. It needs the fire of the Phoenix to restore its glory." He gestured to his peerage. "My queens, my rooks, my knights, my bishops, my pawns. All of them loyal, all of them powerful. What do you have? A handful of misfits and a human pet." His gaze fell on Naruto again, who was still leaning against a shattered pillar, watching the confrontation with an unnerving placidity. The fact that the human wasn't cowering or showing any sign of fear seemed to infuriate Riser more than Rias's defiance. "You," Riser snapped, pointing a finger at Naruto. "Human, kneel before your betters." Naruto slowly lowered his water bottle, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "I don't think so." The quiet refusal was more effective than any shout. Riser's face contorted with rage. "Insolent filth. You dare to defy a high-class devil. Ubeluna," he barked. A tall, beautiful woman with purple hair, his queen, stepped forward. "Teach this creature some manners. Show it the consequence of disrespecting the House of Phoenix." Ubeluna bowed slightly. "As you wish, Lord Riser." A massive ball of purple fire, crackling with demonic energy, formed in her hands. The heat was intense, causing the very air to shimmer. Rias's peerage tensed, ready to leap to Naruto's defense. "Stay back," Naruto said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of command. He didn't even stand up straight. As Ubeluna launched the massive fireball, an attack that would have incinerated a lesser being, Naruto simply vanished. One moment he was there, leaning against the pillar. The next, he was gone, replaced by a perfectly ordinary log that was instantly consumed by the purple flames. The explosion rocked the training grounds, gouging another crater into the abused earth. Riser and his peerage stared at the spot where Naruto had been, a triumphant smirk on Riser's face. A fitting end for such trash. "Looking for me?" The voice came from directly behind him. Riser whirled around. Naruto was standing there, not a scratch on him, his arms crossed over his chest. He hadn't moved with incredible speed. He had used the substitution jutsu, a basic shinobi technique of misdirection. But in a world unfamiliar with such arts, it was like magic. The smiles vanished from the faces of Riser's peerage. Yubeluna's eyes widened in shock. To have a high-powered magical attack dodged so completely, so effortlessly, was unheard of. Riser's shock quickly morphed back into rage. You think your little tricks can save you? You are nothing. Less than nothing. I am Riser Phoenix, and I am immortal. You cannot defeat me. Immortal is a strong word, Naruto said, his tone conversational. I've met a few people who thought they were immortal. They were wrong. He finally pushed himself off the imaginary pillar he was leaning on and met Riser's furious gaze. Your problem is with Rias. So you want to settle this the old-fashioned way? Fine. A rating game. Your peerage against hers. Riser laughed. You think her pathetic collection of strays could ever hope to defeat my peerage? I have a full set. Each of them hand-picked for their power and loyalty. It would be a slaughter. Maybe. Naruto conceded with a shrug. But it's the only way to settle this, isn't it? Unless you're afraid. The taunt hit its mark. Afraid. Riser fears nothing. Very well. I, Riser Phoenix, formally challenge Rias Gremory to a rating game to settle the matter of our engagement. Before Rias could respond, Naruto held up a hand. Let's make it more interesting, he said, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. Peerage battles can be messy. Time-consuming. How about we simplify things? A one-on-one duel. You, against me. The proposal was so outrageous, so utterly insane, that for a moment, everyone was silent. A mere human challenging a high-class devil, and not just any devil, but a Phoenix, whose family was famed for their regenerative abilities. Riser stared at him, then threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was a genuine, belly-deep laugh of pure amusement. You want to fight me. The human pet wants to fight an immortal. This is the most pathetic, most hilarious thing I have ever heard. I accept. I will take great pleasure in burning you to ash over and over again until you beg for death. Lord Riser, perhaps that is unwise, Yubeluna began, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had seen how the human had moved, the unnerving calm in his eyes. Silence. Riser snapped. It is decided. This will be the perfect way to show Rias the utter futility of her resistance. When I am done with her little pet, she will come crawling to me. A large, crimson communication circle suddenly glowed on the ground. The projected image of Sears's Lucifer appeared. He had clearly been observing the entire exchange. His face was grim. Riser Phoenix, the Satan said, his voice echoing with authority. I have heard your challenge, and the counter-offer. I will sanction this duel. The rules will be simple. The fight will take place in a pocket dimension. The winner is decided when one party is either unable to continue or surrenders. The stakes are as you have discussed. If Naruto Uzumaki wins, the engagement between you and my sister is hereby dissolved. If you win, the engagement stands. Is this understood? Perfectly. Riser crowed, his victory already assured in his mind. Naruto Uzumaki, Sears's asked, his holographic eyes focusing on the blonde shinobi. There was a note of concern in his voice. Naruto simply gave a slight nod. Understood. Then it is settled, Sears's declared. The duel will take place in 1 hour. The communication circle faded, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Riser shot Naruto a final, venomous glare. Enjoy your last hour of life, human, he spat, before he and his peerage vanished in another pillar of flame. As soon as they were gone, Rias rounded on Naruto, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and fury. What have you done? Do you have any idea what you've just agreed to? He's a Phoenix. His wounds heal instantly. He can't be beaten in a battle of attrition. You've just signed your own death warrant. Rias is right, Kiba added, his hand gripping his sword hilt. His power is immense, and his regeneration makes him nearly unbeatable. Naruto listened to their frantic warnings, his expression calm. When they had finished, he looked at Rias, his blue eyes clear and steady. Was I wrong? Was there another way to get him to back off for good? Rias opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't find the words. He was right. Riser's arrogance and the political pressure from the elders meant that this confrontation was inevitable. Naruto had simply forced the issue, bringing it to a head on his own terms. Your problem, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm, is that you think of his immortality as an unbeatable advantage. You see it as a wall you can't break down. But every wall has a weakness. You just have to find the right tool to knock it down. He turned and began to walk back towards the mansion. Don't worry, I've dealt with regenerating opponents before. It's just a matter of hitting them with something so big, there's nothing left to regenerate. He walked away, leaving them standing in the ruined training grounds, their hearts filled with a terrifying mix of dread and a tiny, flickering flame of hope. Naruto's confidence was absolute, unshakable. But as he walked, his gaze drifted to the sky. He wasn't thinking about Riser's flames or his immortality. He was thinking about the cold, hungry static he had felt just before the confrontation, the feeling of a vast, unseen predator circling in the dark. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the arrogant devil he was about to face was not the real danger. He was just the opening act. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. An Immortal's Fall. The pocket dimension Searsex created for the duel was a monument to demonic vanity. It was a perfect replica of the ancient Roman Colosseum, rendered in obsidian and marble that gleamed under a perpetually twilight sky. Thousands of phantom spectators, shimmering illusions of devils, filled the stands, their silent judgment adding a theatrical weight to the proceedings. In a private, floating balcony, Rias and her peerage stood alongside Searsex and his wife, Graphia Lucifuge. The tension was a living thing, a suffocating pressure that made it hard to breathe. Are you certain about this, my lord? Graphia asked, her voice a model of calm control that did not quite conceal the worry in her silver eyes. To stake my lady's future on an unknown human. Searsex's gaze was fixed on the empty arena floor. That unknown human tore a hole in the Gremory summoning chamber with less effort than I would use to open a door. We are not staking Rias's future on him. We are witnessing the consequences of a decision we have already made. Rias clenched her fists, her knuckles white. She watched the empty sand, her heart a frantic, fluttering bird in her chest. She had seen Naruto's power. But she had also heard the legends of the Phoenix clan. Immortality was a powerful concept, a force that defied the natural order. How could anyone, even Naruto, fight something that could not be broken? A pillar of fire erupted in the center of the arena, and Riser Phoenix appeared, his arms spread wide as if to embrace the adulation of the phantom crowd. His golden hair was immaculate, his arrogant smile firmly in place. Two massive wings of pure flame unfurled from his back, casting a warm, flickering light over the entire Colosseum. Behold, he announced, his voice magically amplified to fill the vast space. Riser Phoenix has arrived. Witness the power of a true noble. Witness the might of immortality. And witness the pathetic end of the human who dared to challenge his betters. He postured for a moment, soaking in the imaginary glory, before turning his gaze to the empty space opposite him. Well, where is the little sewer rat? Has he why understood the folly of his actions and fled in terror? As if in answer to his question, Naruto simply appeared. There was no flash of light, no pillar of fire. One moment the space was empty, the next, he was standing there. His hands shoved casually in the pockets of his tattered trousers. The sheer, understated nature of his arrival was a more profound statement of power than all of Riser's fiery theatrics. It was the entrance of a man who didn't need to announce his presence because his very existence was an event. Riser's smile tightened. So, the vermin has decided to show up for his execution. I will try to make it quick. Human, though Riser promises nothing. Your screams will be a delightful tribute to my victory. Naruto just looked at him, his blue eyes calm and analytical. He was sizing him up, gauging his stance. The flow of his demonic energy, the subtle tells in his posture. You talk too much, Naruto said, his voice flat and unimpressed. The duel began. Riser, his rage ignited by the casual disrespect, didn't hesitate. With a roar, he unleashed a torrent of fire, a massive wave of golden flame that surged across the arena floor, turning the sand to glass in its wake. It was an attack of overwhelming force, meant to end the fight before it had even begun. From the balcony, Rias gasped. Issei yelled Naruto's name, but Naruto was already gone. He moved with a liquid grace. A flicker of motion too fast for most of them to follow. He was on top of one of the Colosseum's high walls, looking down at the inferno he had just effortlessly avoided. "Is that it?" he called down, his voice laced with a faint, mocking tone. "I was expecting more." Riser's face contorted in a mask of fury. He launched himself into the air on his wings of flame and shot towards Naruto, his hands conjuring lances of fire. The air filled with the sound of explosions as Naruto evaded the barrage, moving along the curved wall of the arena with an agility that seemed to defy gravity. He wasn't just dodging, he was playing. He was using Riser's own attacks as a smokescreen, appearing and disappearing within the blasts of fire and smoke, always one step ahead. "Stand still and die, you insect!" Riser screamed, his frustration mounting with every missed attack. He finally managed to corner Naruto, trapping him against a section of the wall with a cage of fire. He flew in close, a triumphant sneer on his face. His hand wreathed in flame for the final blow. Nowhere left to run. The Naruto in front of him just smiled, then dissolved into a puff of smoke. "A clone." "Wrong," a voice said from directly above. Riser looked up just in time to see the real Naruto plummeting towards him, a swirling, blue sphere of energy in his hand. Rasengan. The attack slammed into Riser's back, grinding into him with the force of a small typhoon and blasting him out of the air. He crashed into the arena floor with a sickening thud, carving a long trench in the sand. For a moment, he lay still. He did it. Issei cheered, but Rias and Sirzex knew better. A faint, golden glow began to emanate from Riser's broken form. His twisted limbs straightened, his scorched flesh mended, and within seconds, he was rising to his feet. Not a scratch on him. The only evidence of the attack was the tattered remains of his expensive coat. He laughed, a low, menacing chuckle that quickly grew into a full-throated roar of arrogant amusement. "Did you see that? He actually thought that would work. You cannot harm me, human. I am immortal. Every injury you inflict will be erased. You will tire, you will run out of energy. And then I will burn you to a crisp." To prove his point, he conjured another massive fireball and hurled it at Naruto, who had just landed. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. He simply created two shadow clones. And the three of them began to work in perfect, silent unison. One clone started forming a Rasengan, while the other began adding wind element chakra to it. The high-pitched, shrieking sound of a blade being formed from pure wind filled the arena. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. Naruto hurled the attack. It was a spinning, four-pointed shuriken of pure, condensed wind. And it flew across the arena with a terrifying scream. It met Riser's fireball head-on, and didn't just negate it, but tore straight through it, the fire parting around the spinning vortex of wind. Riser's eyes widened in genuine shock. He tried to dodge, but the Rasenshuriken was too fast. It struck him square in the chest. The result was not an explosion, but an implosion. A dome of swirling wind erupted, trapping Riser within it. On the balcony, they could only watch in horror as countless microscopic wind blades shredded Riser's body on a cellular level. It was a storm of a million tiny cuts. A death by 1,000 needles every second. When the dome of wind finally dissipated, there was almost nothing left of Riser Phoenix. Just a smoking, vaguely humanoid shape on the sand. But still, it was not enough. The golden light of regeneration appeared again, faint at first, then growing in intensity. Slowly, agonizingly, flesh, muscle, and bone began to knit themselves back together. It was a grotesque, horrifying sight. But it was happening. Riser was coming back from complete annihilation. From the balcony, Rias felt a wave of despair. It was useless. He really was immortal. Riser, now fully reformed, was panting heavily. His arrogant smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. The last attack had clearly taken a toll. But he was still standing. "You see," he gasped, a wild look in his eyes. "Even that was nothing. You cannot win." Naruto stood across from him, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet. "I can't beat you by trying to cut you down piece by piece. Your regeneration is impressive, but it's not true immortality." He took a deep breath, and the atmosphere in the entire Colosseum shifted. A new and terrifying power began to rise from him. An energy so dense, so primal, that it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. It was a crimson energy, bubbling and malevolent, and it took the form of a fox with a single, lashing tail. A cloak of pure, raw power. What is that power? Sirzex whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and alarm. It was not demonic, it was not holy, it was something else entirely. Something ancient and wild. So, you can heal from any injury, Naruto said, his voice now carrying a strange, double echo, his own and the deep, rumbling growl of the beast within him. The whisker marks on his cheeks darkened, his eyes shifting from blue to a slitted, predatory red. But that healing costs you energy. Every time you piece yourself back together, you're draining your battery. That last attack took a lot out of you, didn't it? Riser took an involuntary step back, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. I don't need to destroy you, Naruto continued, holding up his hand. A dark, purple-black sphere of energy began to form in his palm, a dense ball of chakra so powerful it seemed to bend the very light around it. It was a Biju bomb, a tailed beast ball, compressed to the size of a standard Rasengan. It was an attack of absolute, undeniable destruction. I just need to hit you with something so big, you won't have enough energy left to put yourself back together. He vanished. He didn't use a jutsu, he just moved, his speed enhanced to an impossible degree by Kurama's chakra. He appeared directly in front of the terrified Phoenix, the small, dark sphere held out in front of him. Checkmate, he whispered. He thrust the Biju bomb into Riser's chest. There was no sound. There was only light. A blinding, all-consuming SPH. Air of white-hot energy erupted from the point of impact, expanding rapidly to fill the entire arena. The phantom spectators, the obsidian walls, the very sky of the pocket dimension were washed away in a silent, incandescent wave of pure power. The observers on the balcony were shielded by a barrier Sirzex threw up at the last second, but they were still thrown back by the sheer concussive force. When their vision cleared, the Colosseum was gone. They were floating in a void of fractured space. Below them was a massive, newly formed crater, its bottom glowing with residual heat. And in the center of that crater, lying in a heap, was Riser Phoenix. He was unconscious, his body twitching feebly, faint sparks of his regenerative power flickering and dying across his burnt form like failing embers. He was beaten, his vast reserves of demonic energy completely and utterly spent. Standing over him was Naruto, the crimson cloak of chakra receding back into him, leaving him looking as calm and unassuming as he had at the start. He wasn't even breathing heavily. A profound silence filled the void. Rias stared, her mind unable to fully process the scale of what she had just witnessed. Issei's jaw was hanging open. Akino's usual smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated awe. Kiba and Kaneko were simply stunned into silence. The winner, Sirzex announced, his voice filled with a gravity that Rias had never heard before, is Naruto Uzumaki. The engagement between the House of Gremory and the House of Phoenix is officially dissolved. As Riser's peerage teleported into the crater to retrieve their broken master, their faces pale with shock and terror, Naruto looked up, not at the balcony, but at the empty space above him. Just for a second, as the pocket dimension began to collapse, he felt it again. The cold static. It was stronger now, more focused, as if his colossal display of power had been a beacon, a flare lit in an infinite darkness. And for the first time, he felt a response. It wasn't a voice or an image, just a feeling, a sliver of alien consciousness brushing against his own. It was a feeling of cold, analytical curiosity. Subject identified, power source, anomalous, threat level, significant, designation, priority target. The feeling vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Naruto with a cold dread that had nothing to do with the defeated devil at his feet. He was transported back to the Gremory training grounds, landing softly on the scorched grass. Rias and the others appeared a moment later. She rushed towards him, her face a maelstrom of emotions, relief, gratitude, awe, and a new, unsettling fear. She stopped a few feet from him, looking at him as if seeing him for the first time. He was her savior. He was the one who had freed her from a future she dreaded. But he was also a monster of unimaginable power, a being who could casually erase a pocket dimension and defeat an immortal, without breaking a sweat. She had summoned a protector. But she was beginning to understand that she had brought a force of nature into her world, and she had no idea what it would do next. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dark. The return to the Gremory estate was a muted, surreal affair. The scorched grass of the training grounds seemed mundane, almost insulting, after the cosmic violence they had just witnessed. Riser's peerage had collected their broken lord and vanished without a word, their faces a mask of terror and humiliation. The immediate threat was gone, Rias was free, yet no one was celebrating. They just stood there, staring at Naruto. The silence thick with unspoken questions and a profound, newly birthed fear. It was Issei who broke the spell, as he so often did, with a burst of unfiltered emotion. That was, holy crap. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. You totally annihilated him. You were like, bam, Rasengan. And then, whoosh, weird shuriken thing. And then you went all crazy fox mode and were like, kablooey. And, Issei, shut up, Kaneko said, her voice flat, but her golden eyes were fixed on Naruto with an intensity that went beyond her usual stoicism. Rias took a hesitant step forward. Naruto. Thank you. The words felt small, hopelessly inadequate. How do you thank someone for tearing apart reality to save you? I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Naruto replied. His voice back to its normal tenor, the monstrous echo of Kurama completely gone. He looked tired, not physically, but with a deep, soul-level weariness that was becoming familiar to them. I said I'd help with your problem. I did. Now, you help me with mine. The transactional nature of the statement, the reminder of their bargain, was both a comfort and a chilling reality check. It grounded the situation, but it also reinforced the fact that he was not one of them. He was an outsider, an ally of convenience, a being whose true motivations and origins were still a mystery. Searsex and Graphia teleported in, their expressions grim. The Satan's gaze was fixed solely on Naruto, a complex mixture of gratitude, awe, and deep-seated apprehension in his eyes. He had sanctioned the duel, but he had never, in his wildest imaginings, anticipated such a result. The raw power Naruto had unleashed hadn't just defeated Riser, it had momentarily destabilized the very fabric of the pocket dimension. It was a power on par with, if not exceeding, his own power of destruction. And it was housed in a being who was a complete unknown. Naruto Uzumaki, Searsex said, his voice heavy with formality. On behalf of the House of Gremory, and as one of the 4 great Satans, I offer you my deepest gratitude. You have averted a great deal of unpleasantness. Naruto simply nodded, just keeping my end of the bargain. Indeed, Searsex said, perhaps you and I could have a private conversation. There is much we need to discuss. The unspoken message was clear. I need to know what you are. Naruto agreed, and the two of them walked towards the mansion, leaving a bewildered and unnerved peerage behind with Graphia. As they walked, Searsex erected a powerful privacy barrier around them. A shimmering crimson field that blocked both sound and sight. The power you used at the end, Searsex began, wasting no time on pleasantries. The crimson chakra, the voice, it was not your own, was it? He's my partner, Naruto said simply. His name is Kurama, partner. Kurama's voice grumbled in his head. After all we've been through, I'm just your partner. Quiet, you, Naruto shot back internally. A second entity resides within you. Searsex asked, his mind racing through all the lore he knew of possession, familiars, and symbiotic beings. None of it quite fit. It's a long story, Naruto said. Let's just say my people have a complicated relationship with giant chakra monsters. He and I came to an understanding. Searsex accepted the vague explanation, recognizing it as the boundary it was. This chakra of yours. It is capable of destroying a being on a cellular level and overwhelming the regenerative abilities of a phoenix. The sheer scale of your final atta, CK, it is a power that could threaten the entire underworld. It wasn't an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. And I could say the same about your power of destruction, Naruto countered, his gaze steady. Power is power. It's what you do with it that matters. I'm not interested in your world, Searsex. I'm not here to conquer or destroy it. I just want to go home. And we will devote every resource to that end. Searsex promised, his voice sincere. But you must understand my position. Your existence here has changed the political landscape. The news of Riser's defeat will spread. The other noble houses will see this not as Rias freeing herself from an unwanted marriage, but as the House of Gremory acquiring a new, terrifying weapon. They will be afraid. And fear makes devils do stupid, dangerous things. Naruto's jaw tightened. So, I saved your sister from a bad marriage, and in return, I've become the boogeyman for your entire species. Essentially, yes, Searzex admitted. You are no longer just an unknown. You are a king-level power with no known allegiances, living under my sister's roof. You will have enemies you've never met. They will test you, plot against you, try to use you or eliminate you. The underworld is not a kind place for those who disrupt the balance of power. Let them try, Naruto said, his voice low and hard. It's not like I haven't dealt with that before. The conversation ended on that ominous note, and understanding reached between two beings of immense power. They were allies, for now, but both knew how fragile that alliance truly was. Meanwhile, in a sterile, white chamber deep beneath the Vatican, a different kind of conversation was taking place. The room was circular, its walls lined with humming servers and glowing screens that displayed data streams in an arcane, Enochian script. This was the command center for the Stigma, a clandestine task force of the Church's most elite and fanatical exorcists, dedicated to neutralizing threats that fell outside the purview of the treaties with devils and fallen angels. At the center of the room stood Marcus Valerius, the task force commander. He was a man carved from granite and zeal. His face a roadmap of old battle scars, his eyes the cold, hard chips of a frozen sea. On a massive holographic display in front of him were two glowing points of light on a global map. One was in Japan, where the Forgotten Shrine had been vaporized. The other was pinpointed directly over the Gremory estate in the underworld. Report, Marcus commanded, his voice like the grating of stone on stone. A young, pale woman in a lab coat, one of the Church's top theologians and energy analysts, pointed a trembling finger at the first light. The energy signature from the Japanese incident is primordial, Commander. It is pure, undiluted creation-class holy power. It predates the system. It predates everything. The symbol left behind corresponds to a forgotten name in the Apocrypha, a cleansing aspect. An archangel of origin tasked with wiping the slate clean when creation became impure. And the second spike? Marcus asked, his gaze shifting to the light over the devil's territory. That is the anomaly, the analyst said. It occurred less than an hour ago. The energy output was astronomical, enough to temporarily warp the dimensional fabric in that region. But its signature is a paradox. It is not demonic, it is not fallen, but it is not holy, either. It is something other. A life force of unbelievable magnitude. Marcus stared at the 2 points of light. Two impossible energy sources appearing within weeks of each other. To his mind, steeped in dogma and the black and white morality of a holy warrior, the conclusion was simple. They are connected, he stated. This archangel has manifested, or has chosen a host. The second spike was a declaration. A demonstration of its power, deep in the heart of enemy territory. It has begun. But Commander, the analyst protested. The signatures are completely different. They don't match at all. Deception, Marcus snapped, his certainty absolute. A wolf cloaking itself in a strange new skin. The timing is too convenient. This entity has come to purge the world of the supernatural, and its first blow was struck against a pillar of the devil nobility. Our mission is to preserve the balance, to protect humanity from the collateral damage of the wars fought by these abominations. A cleansing force of this magnitude is the single greatest threat to that balance we have ever faced. He turned to a grizzled, one-eyed exorcist standing at attention behind him. Griselda, mobilize your team. Your target is the source of the second energy signature. The Gremory domain. Infiltrate. Identify the host of this new power, and if possible, capture it. If capture is not an option, he let the sentence hang in the air, his meaning perfectly clear. Neutralize the threat. By any means necessary. Griselda nodded, a grim smile on her face. It will be done, Commander. They were making a fatal miscalculation, connecting two completely unrelated events through the lens of their own fanaticism. They thought they were hunting a single, nascent godlike entity, They had no idea they were about to walk into a collision between a shinobi who could level mountains and a primordial force they couldn't possibly comprehend. With the Gremory peerage trapped squarely in the middle, Naruto found Kaneko sitting on the edge of a decorative fountain in the mansion's sprawling garden. She was tossing small pebbles into the water. Her expression as unreadable as ever. But he could feel the turmoil beneath her stoic exterior. Her senjutsu, her life force, was in a state of flux, agitated by the colossal energies she had just witnessed. He sat down next to her, not saying a word. They sat in a comfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the chirping of some unseen underworld creature and the GENTLE splash of the pebbles hitting the water. That fox, Kaneko said finally, her voice barely a whisper. He's the source of your senjutsu. Naruto was surprised by the directness of the question. He's part of it. He's made of the same kind of energy. Nature energy. Just a lot more of it. And he used to be a lot angrier. He doesn't feel angry now, she observed. He feels old and tired. We both are, Naruto admitted, looking up at the crimson sky. In the fight, you became like him, she continued, her golden eyes studying him. It looked like it hurt. Naruto thought back to his early days of training. Of the nine tails chakra burning his skin, the rage that threatened to consume him. It used to. We fought for a long time. Now, it's different. We work together. I see, she said. Another pebble splashed into the water. Thank you for saving Rias-senpai. You are not a bad person, even if you are scary. Coming from Kaneko, it was the highest of compliments. Naruto felt a genuine smile touch his lips for the first time that day. You're not so scary yourself, for a devil who can punch through steel. A tiny, almost imperceptible upward twitch at the corner of her mouth was his only reply. It was a small moment, a quiet island of calm in the swirling sea of chaos his life had become, but it was a connection. It was a reminder that even in this strange, hostile new world, he could still find people who saw beyond the monster, beyond the weapon, and saw the person underneath. Later that night, Rias found him standing on the same balcony where she had first shown him the vast, sprawling city of her family's domain. The duel felt like a lifetime ago. The fear she had felt was still there, a low thrum of apprehension in the back of her mind, but it was now overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of respect and a desperate curiosity. You can't sleep either, she asked softly. He shook his head, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Too much on my mind. Sears told me what you discussed, she said. That you've become a target. She looked down at her hands. This is my fault. I dragged you into this. You did, he agreed, without any trace of accusation. But it's too late to worry about that now. We just have to deal with what comes next. He fell silent for a moment, his senses stretching out, feeling the pulse of this strange world. That feeling I told you about. The static. The feeling of being watched. What about it? Rias asked, a nervous tremor in her voice. I felt it again, right after the fight, he said, his voice low and serious. But this time was different. It wasn't just watching. It was learning. It took notice of me. He turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense in the dim light of the underworld's perpetual twilight. Your other is worried about the devils who are afraid of me. He's looking at the chessboard and seeing the pieces that are already there. He turned his gaze back to the dark horizon. But he's wrong. The real threat isn't on the board. It's the player who is about to sit down and flip the whole table over. As he spoke, the cold whisper brushed against his senses again, no longer distant, but closer, more defined. It was the psychic residue of a focused will, the trail left by hunters closing in on their prey. They were no longer just being watched. They were being stalked, and they were coming. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Hounds of Heaven. A fragile, uneasy peace settled over the Gremory estate in the days following the duel. The underworld's rumor mill, a force more potent than any demonic magic, was churning at full capacity. The news of Riser Phoenix's humiliating defeat had spread like wildfire, but the details were twisted and exaggerated with every retelling. Some said the Gremory clan had summoned an ancient demon king. Others whispered they had made a pact with a being from the void. In every version, Naruto Uzumaki was painted as a figure of terrifying, monstrous power, and the House of Gremory was no longer seen as a declining pillar, but as the master of a terrifying new weapon. This new reputation was a double-edged sword. While the pressure from the elders regarding Rias's engagement had vanished overnight, it was replaced by a new kind of scrutiny. Envoys from other noble houses began to arrive, their visits cloaked in the guise of diplomacy but their true purpose as clear: to see the Gremory weapon for themselves. Naruto, for his part, ignored them completely, spending his time either buried in the library, searching for any text, however obscure, on dimensional travel, or relentlessly training Rias's peerage. The dynamic of their training had changed. The awe they felt for him was now tinged with a palpable fear, a constant awareness of the apocalyptic power he kept leashed within him. He pushed them harder than ever, his methods bordering on brutal. "No, Rias," he barked, slapping her hand down as she began to gather the crimson energy of her family's destructive power. "Stop trying to solve every problem with your biggest hammer. It's sloppy, it's inefficient, and against a faster opponent, you'll be dead before you even launch it." They were sparring in the now repaired training grounds. Rias, frustrated and on the defensive, was falling back on her most powerful instincts. "But it's my strongest attack," she protested, dodging a swipe from a shadow clone. "And it's your only trick." Naruto shot back. "You have a massive reserve of demonic energy. Use it. Use it to create smaller, faster blasts. Use it to reinforce your body. Use it to create a shield, a diversion. Anything other than a giant, slow-moving ball of, 'kill me now.'" He formed a Rasengan in his palm, holding the perfectly stable sphere of swirling chakra inches from her face. "This is control, Rias. It's not about how much power you can unleash. It's about how perfectly you can command what you have. Until you learn that, you'll always just be a princess. You'll never be a warrior." His words were harsh, but they struck a chord. She looked at the controlled, effortless power in his hand, then thought of her own wild, untamed energy, and for the first time, she saw the truth in his criticism. That night, the attack came. It came without warning, a silent, deadly intrusion that bypassed the Gremory clan's formidable outer magical defenses as if they were nothing more than cobwebs. Naruto was the first to sense it. He was meditating in the garden, trying to extend his senses, to get another feel for the cold, static presence that haunted him. Instead, he felt something else. A new set of energies, sharp, focused, and utterly alien, had just appeared inside the mansion's perimeter. They felt like tiny needles of light in the overwhelming darkness of the underworld's ambient demonic energy. And they were moving with a chilling, predatory purpose. "Holy power," Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind. "Pious, self-righteous, and very, very dangerous to the devils you're cohabitating with." Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was on his feet in an instant, a kunai of the flying thunder god in his hand. He had placed his marked seals all over the estate, a precaution born from a lifetime of war. One was in the main hall. He vanished in a yellow flash just as the first explosion rocked the mansion. He appeared in the main hall to a scene of chaos. A section of the grand staircase had been blown apart, not by an explosion of fire or demonic energy, but by a concussive blast of pure, white light. Kiba and Issei were there, thrown back by the force of the attack. Standing amidst the shimmering, holy dust were three figures clad in stark white combat robes adorned with silver crosses. Their faces were hidden by deep hoods, and they radiated an aura of cold, unwavering zeal. More importantly, the entire hall was now contained within a shimmering, golden barrier. He could feel it pressing in, a cage of holy magic designed to cut off escape and communication. "Exorcists," Kiba hissed, stumbling to his feet and summoning his demonic sword. "In the name of the Lord, your corruption ends tonight, devils." The lead exorcist declared, his voice ringing with fanaticism. He held up a hand, and a crossbow formed from pure light appeared in it. Before he could fire, two more figures crashed through the stained glass windows on the upper landing. It was Akino and Kaneko, intercepted on their way to the commotion. Their opponents were another pair of hooded exorcists, one wielding a whip of braided light, the other a pair of silver, consecrated gauntlets. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged attack, a professional hit. Naruto's mind worked with battlefield clarity. 5 intruders, all high level, a containment barrier, primary targets, Rias's peerage. Secondary objective, isolate and overwhelm. He tossed a marked kunai to Kiba. Protect Rias. Find her and get her to the safe room. Go. Kiba nodded, recognizing the command of a true leader. He grabbed Eda stunned Issei and they raced down a side corridor, the lead exorcist's light bolt shattering the marble floor where they had been standing. Naruto turned to the exorcist. You just made a big mistake. Abomination. The exorcist spat, his eyes widening from within his hood as he finally recognized Naruto from the stigma's briefing. You are the target, the unholy vessel. Surrender to the will of God. He fired a volley of bolts, each one a searing lance of holy energy. Naruto moved, a blur of motion that seemed to defy physics. He wasn't just fast, he was flowing around the attacks, the light bolts passing harmlessly through the space he had occupied a microsecond before. He closed the distance in an instant, his fist drawn back. The exorcist, confident in his consecrated robes and personal holy barrier, braced for the impact. Naruto's fist slammed into the invisible shield, and it shattered like glass. The exorcist's eyes went wide with disbelief. The punch, drained of most of its kinetic force, still had enough power to send him flying back into the golden containment barrier, where he slumped to the ground, unconscious. Naruto didn't pause. He flashed up to the second floor, arriving just as the exorcist with the light whip disarmed Akeno, the holy energy searing her hand and causing her to cry out in pain. Akeno. Naruto was on him, a Rasengan already formed. The exorcist, a woman with a grim, scarred face, had no time to react. The Rasengan slammed into her midsection, and she was blasted through the wall and out into the night, her scream cut short. The remaining exorcist, the one with the gauntlets, turned from Kaneko to face this new, impossible threat. He was a mountain of a man, and he roared as he charged, his silver fists glowing with holy power. For the glory of, Naruto didn't give him the chance to finish. He dropped low, sweeping the man's legs out from under him. As the giant fell, Naruto drove his elbow into the back of his neck with surgical precision. The giant collapsed, out cold, 3 down in less than 30 seconds. But even as he straightened up, he knew it wasn't over. This was too easy. They were just the grunts, the distraction. He could feel 2 more sources of holy power, stronger than the others, moving through the mansion. One was heading for the library. The other was waiting. An ambush. A new voice, cold, female, and utterly assured, echoed through the shattered hall from an unseen source. Impressive. Your resistance to holy power is greater than anticipated. But you are not a devil. And you are not an angel. The commander was right. You are a cancer. A paradox that must be removed. Suddenly, the floor beneath Naruto's feet erupted in a blindingly complex array of golden runes. Blessed chains, forged from solidified holy light, shot up and wrapped around his limbs, his torso, sealing him in place. They burned, the holy energy searing his skin, a pain far more intense than any physical injury. It felt like his very chakra was being set on fire. A sealing trap, Kurama growled. Clever little humans. The final 2 exorcists appeared. One was a small, lithe man who emerged from the shadows near the library, holding a glowing artifact, the source of the containment barrier. The other was a woman who landed gracefully on the ruined staircase. She wore no hood. Her hair was silver, cut in a severe, militant style. And a long scar ran over her right eye, which was a milky white. Her left eye was a piercing, fanatical blue. In her hand, she held a magnificent, ornate spear, its tip glowing with a light so pure it was painful to look at. This was the leader. This was Griselda. Griselda Quarta, Rias's voice called out. She had emerged from the corridor with Kiba and Issei, her face a mask of cold fury. You dare to lead an attack on the home of a Satan's sister. You have just declared war. Griselda's cold gaze flickered to Rias, but dismissed her almost immediately. Her focus was entirely on the chained Naruto. There will be no war, little devil. Only a quiet cleansing. Your new pet is a threat to the balance of the world. We are here to correct it. The chains tightened around Naruto, the burning sensation intensifying. He gritted his teeth, his muscles straining against the holy light. You think these can hold me? He groaned, forcing the words out through the pain. Quote, they are forged from a prayer spoken by the Archangel Michael himself, Griselda said, her voice devoid of emotion. They are designed to hold the strongest of fiends. You will be purified, abomination. Your unnatural existence will be erased. She raised her spear, its point aimed at Naruto's heart. The rest of you are irrelevant. Kiba and Akino charged, their loyalty overriding their fear. But the small man near the library simply tapped the artifact in his hand. The golden containment barrier pulsed, and a wave of holy energy washed through the room. The devils all cried out, staggering as if struck a physical blow. Their demonic power suppressed and weakened. It's useless, Griselda stated. This is a sanctuary. Within this dome, our power is absolute, and yours is suffocated. Now, witness the end of your false idol. She lunged, the spear a streak of blinding light. Rias screamed, but the spear never struck home. I warned you, Naruto's voice echoed, no longer strained, but dangerously low. A vast, overwhelming pressure slammed into the room, a chakra so immense and so malevolent it felt like the world was tilting on its axis. The golden chains around him began to crack, red orange energy seeping through the fractures. The holy light sizzled and evaporated where it touched the crimson chakra. His eyes snapped open. They were no longer blue, but blood red, with slitted pupils. You made a big mistake. With a roar that was more beast than man, he shattered the chains of holy light. The crimson energy of the 9 tails exploded outwards, a cloak of raw power with one lashing tail. The sanctuary barrier flickered violently, the pure holy energy struggling against the raw, primal force of nature that was Kurama's chakra. Griselda skidded to a halt, her eyes wide with shock and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, fear. What is this power? It is not demonic. It is rage. It is life itself, twisted into a weapon. You wanted to see a monster. Naruto snarled, his voice a duet of his own and the fox's. Fine, I'll show you a monster. He vanished from his spot, appearing directly in front of the barrier expert. The man had no time to react before Naruto's hand, wreathed in crimson chakra, slammed into the artifact he was holding. The holy relic shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the golden sanctuary dome collapsed with the sound of breaking glass. Rias and her peerage felt their strength return in a rush. But they could only stare as Naruto, now a whirlwind of crimson death, turned his attention to Griselda. The elite exorcist was no coward. She met his charge, her holy spear clashing against his chakra-wreathed fist. The impact sent a shockwave that tore up the marble floor. Light and life force collided in a furious, desperate dance. Griselda was skilled, a master warrior who had slain hundreds of powerful supernatural beings. But she was fighting a force of nature. For every blow she landed with her spear, a searing sea. That would have crippled a high-class devil. Naruto ignored it, his wounds steaming and closing instantly thanks to Kurama's chakra. He fought with a feral, brutal efficiency, his claws of red energy tearing chunks from the floor and walls, forcing Griselda back step by step. She realized her mistake. They had come to hunt a monster, but they had only succeeded in cornering it. And now, it was unleashed. Fall back, she screamed into her communicator, parrying a blow that nearly shattered her spear. Mission failed. I repeat, fall back. She kicked off the ground, putting distance between herself and Naruto. And threw a concentrated ball of light at the ceiling. The resulting explosion brought a shower of rubble down, creating a momentary diversion. When the dust cleared, she and the other surviving exorcists were gone. Vanished into the underworld night. The crimson cloak of chakra slowly receded, and Naruto stood panting in the center of his ruined home, his red eyes fading back to blue. The immediate danger was over. But a profound line had been crossed. Rias looked at the devastation, at the fear and awe on the faces of her friends, at the simmering rage still radiating from Naruto. The church had come into her home. They had tried to kill her friends. They had tried to kill the man who had saved her. Sears had warned that Naruto's presence would make them a target. She hadn't truly understood what that meant until now. It wasn't about political maneuvering or whispered threats anymore. The war had come to their doorstep. And as Naruto looked up, his gaze sweeping over the wreckage, he wasn't looking at the shattered walls or broken furniture. He was looking at the sky, as if he could see the puppet masters who had sent these zealots. And in his eyes, Rias saw a promise. They had started this. He was going to finish it. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Scars and Stratagems. The silence that descended upon the ruined hull was heavier than any of the fallen masonry. It was a silence filled with the ozone tang of holy power and the thick, coppery scent of Naruto's own evaporating crimson chakra. Rias's peerage, their own minor injuries forgotten, stood frozen, their eyes locked on Naruto. The monstrous, bestial rage that had radiated from him was gone, but a cold, hard fury remained, glittering in his blue eyes like shards of ice. He was no longer just their unexpected guest or their overpowered ace in the hole. He was a comrade who had bled in their home, for their sake. The air shimmered, and Seer's ex-Lucifer appeared, Graphia at his side. The Satan's usual placid demeanor was gone, replaced by a mask of cold, regal fury. His crimson eyes swept over the scene of devastation, the shattered marble, the holy scorch marks, the lingering energy of the exorcists, and then they settled on Naruto. He saw the torn clothing, the faint, steaming trails of rapidly healing wounds, and his power flared, a palpable wave of pressure that made the very air grow heavy. Graphia, Seer's ex said, his voice dangerously quiet, see to my sister and her household. He then took a step toward Naruto, his gaze analytical. Are you injured? Nothing that won't heal, Naruto replied, rolling his shoulder. They were professionals, a containment team. They knew how to suppress demonic power and came prepared for a fight. They came prepared for devils, Seer's ex corrected, his eyes narrowing as he examined a scorch mark that still sizzled with holy energy. They were not prepared for you. This energy signature, it is the mark of the stigma, a fanatical sect of church militants. They operate outside the heavenly accords. So they're terrorists, Naruto stated flatly. Of a sort, Seer's ex conceded. Zealots who believe the truce between the three factions is an abomination. They see all non-holy beings as filth to be purged. But they have never been so bold as to directly assault the home of a pillar of the underworld. To attack my sister, he clenched his fist, and a nearby chunk of rubble disintegrated into crimson dust. They would not have done this without a powerful reason. Rias, her face pale with a mixture of shock and anger, stepped forward. Brother, this is an act of war. We must retaliate. We must be smart. Rias, Seer's ex interrupted, his gaze still locked with Naruto's. They were not here for you. They were here for him. He looked back at Naruto. They called you their target. Why? Naruto thought of the cold, analytical presence he had felt, the one that had designated him a priority target. And he thought of what the exorcists had called him. They called me an abomination, an unholy vessel. They seemed to think I was some kind of holy entity in disguise. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity in Seer's ex's mind. He had been briefed by his intelligence network about the church's internal panic over a so-called archangel of origin. They've misidentified you, the Satan breathed, a look of grim understanding on his face. They believe you are the source of a primordial holy power they've been tracking. They think they're hunting a rogue angel, not a shinobi from another world. The sheer, idiotic irony of it was almost laughable. Naruto, the container of the nine-tailed fox, a being of pure, raw life force and chakra, being mistaken for an agent of heaven. So they're fanatics, Naruto said, his voice low and hard as he pieced together their motivations. And they're stupid. That's a dangerous combination. He looked around the ruined hall, at Akeno wincing as Grafe. Iya applied a demonic salve to the holy burn on her hand, at Issei still trembling with adrenaline, at Rias, whose anger was a palpable force. His expression hardened. They came into your home. They tried to hurt my friends. They came for me. This stops now. What are you suggesting? Seer's ex asked, sensing the shift in Naruto's demeanor from reactive to proactive. I'm suggesting that your way of doing things isn't going to work here, Naruto said, meeting the Satan's gaze without flinching. You'll want to send letters, demand meetings, play the diplomat. These people don't do diplomacy. They don't care about your accords. They understand one thing: strength. They kicked in your door. We're going to kick in theirs. Deep in the sterile white heart of the Stigma's command center, Ender Marcus Valerius watched the fragmented combat data from Griselda's helmet cam. He saw the flash of the Rasengan, the effortless takedown of his elite soldiers. He saw the crimson chakra explode into being, shattering the holy chains of Saint Michael. He saw the pure, feral rage in the target's eyes. Griselda stood before him, her arm in a sling, her face pale. Commander, the intelligence was wrong. The entity is not holy. Its power is elemental, primal, a force of pure rage. It fought like a cornered animal, a beast of unbelievable power. We were completely outmatched. You were outmatched because your faith was weak. Griselda, Marcus replied, his voice a low, chilling monotone. He didn't turn from the screen. He replayed the moment the Nine Tails chakra shattered the holy chains. You saw a beast. I see a test. A trial sent by God to weed out the weak of heart. But Commander, you saw its power as a contradiction, Marcus continued, his voice rising with the fervor of a zealot. I see it as the ultimate deception. A power so pure, so primordial, it mimics the chaos of our enemies to hide its true nature. It cloaks itself in the guise of a demon to test our resolve. It wants us to falter, to doubt. I will not. Quote. He turned, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous fire. You failed because you used conventional methods. You tried to cage a storm with conventional chains. You were arrogant. You underestimated God's new instrument. He strode to a vault set into the far wall, pressing his palm against it. With a hiss of pneumatics, it opened, revealing a single item resting on a velvet cushion, a long, gnarled wooden stake, wrapped in ancient scripture and pulsing with a faint, silver light. The Lance of Longinus, Griselda whispered in horror, recognizing the ultimate anti-divine weapon. A relic said to be so powerful it could permanently kill any being, even God himself. Commander, its use is forbidden. It could shatter the balance entirely. The balance is already shattered. Marcus roared, his fanaticism reaching its peak. This, Naruto Uzumaki, is the earthquake. We are the response. He has proven that he is too powerful to be captured. Therefore, he will be destroyed. Take the lance. Gather the remaining arch-exorcists. This time, there will be no retreat. There will be no capture. There will only be purification. He was doubling down, his faith-twisting failure into a call for greater violence. The hounds had been bloodied, and now their master was unleashing a rabid wolf. In a quiet corner of the Gremory gardens that had escaped the destruction, Akeno sat by the fountain, staring at her bandaged hand. The demonic salve had eased the pain, but a deep, ugly scar remained, a testament to the holy energy's potency. It'll scar, Naruto said, his voice startling her. He sat down on the fountain's edge beside her. I know, she replied, her usual teasing smile absent. It's a reminder. Of what? That some people will always hate you for what you are, she said. Her violet eyes clouded with old pain. My father was a fallen angel. My mother was a human priestess. To the fallen, I was a half-breed impurity. To the church, I was the child of sin. They killed my mother, you know. Right in front of me. She looked at Naruto, her gaze sharp and penetrating. That power you used, the red energy, that's the real you, isn't it? The one you keep locked away. Naruto didn't answer immediately. He looked at the rippling water, at the reflection of the underworld's crimson sky. It is, or, it was, it's complicated. For a long time, he was my curse. The reason everyone in my village hated me. They saw me the same way your mother's people saw you. As a monster. Akeno's expression softened with a shared understanding, a kinship of outcasts. What changed? I stopped fighting him, Naruto said. And I started fighting for other people. I found a family. People who didn't care that I was a monster, as long as I was their monster. He looked over at her, his blue eyes holding a profound depth. Rias and the others, they're your family, aren't they? They are, Akeno affirmed, a genuine, gentle smile finally returning to her face. And you, Naruto-kun, you fought for us tonight. Like a wild, terrifying demon king from the old stories. She leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to its more familiar, seductive purr. I have to admit, it was quite exciting. Naruto just sighed, shaking his head at her incorrigible nature, but he couldn't suppress a small smile. The moment of shared vulnerability had forged a new, deeper connection between them. The smile faded as he looked back towards the damaged mansion. Searsex was still in there with Rias, planning the diplomatic response, the official protests. But Naruto knew that was the wrong path. He stood up. Come on. Where are we going? Akeno asked, rising with him. To a war meeting, he said, his voice taking on a hard, decisive edge. Your family was attacked. You were hurt. They tried to put me in chains. This isn't a political incident anymore. He started walking back towards the mansion, his fists clenched at his sides. This is personal. I'm going to teach them what happens when they make things personal with me. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Kicking in the door. The war meeting took place in the Gremory library, the only major room in the mansion that hadn't suffered significant damage. The irony was lost on no one. They were surrounded by books containing centuries of demonic lore, strategy, and diplomatic protocol, and none of it was relevant to the current crisis. Searsek stood at the head of the long, polished table, the very picture of demonic royalty struggling to maintain order. Opposite him, Naruto leaned against a bookshelf, his arms crossed. A storm of focused impatience brewing in his eyes. Between them, Rias and her peerage were a tableau of nervous energy and simmering anger. An unsanctioned, direct assault on any church-affiliated faction is out of the question, Searsek stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble. The political fallout would be catastrophic. It could shatter the accords. It could give the old Satan faction the very excuse they need to rally support for a new great war. We must proceed through official channels. I will draft a formal protest to the seraphs in heaven. We will demand they turn over the leadership of this stigma sect for judgment. Naruto let out a short, harsh laugh devoid of any humor. And how long will that take? Weeks, months, while they rearm, regroup, and come at us again. You saw them, Searseks. They're not soldiers following orders. They're zealots on a crusade. You can't negotiate with people who think you're a stain that needs to be cleansed. Official channels, or a death sentence. He's right, brother, Rias said, her voice firm. She stood up, placing her hands on the table and leaning forward, no longer the uncertain princess but the determined king of her peerage. They attacked my home. They injured my family. They did this because of me, because I brought Naruto here. This is my responsibility, and I will not hide behind you and wait for a diplomatic solution that will never come. Searsek looked at his sister, and for the first time, he saw not just the girl he had doted on, but a leader in her own right, forged in the fire of the last 24 hours. He saw Naruto's influence in her unwavering resolve. What, then, is your alternative? The Satan asked, his question directed at Rias, but his eyes were on Naruto. We take the fight to them. Naruto answered before Rias could. He pushed off the bookshelf and walked to the table, dominating the room with his presence. We don't wait for them to kick our door in again. We find their clubhouse. We kick in their door, and we grab the person in charge. We extract every piece of information they have. Who they are, how many they are, who funds them, and why they think I'm some kind of rogue angel. We cut the head off the snake before it has a chance to strike again. And how do you propose we find this clubhouse? Searsek countered, skepticism warring a grudging respect for the shinobi's directness. The stigma are a ghost organization. Their bases are hidden, protected by the most powerful holy wards the church can devise. Nothing is truly hidden, Naruto stated simply. He turned his gaze to Graphia, who had been standing silently behind Searsek. You're his queen, right? The ultimate support piece. That means you have access to his intelligence network. They made a mistake tonight. They used a large-scale containment barrier and teleportation circles. That leaves an energy trail, a residue. Faint, but it's there. Find it. Graphia's silver eyes widened slightly. The human was not just powerful, he was tactically brilliant. He understood the nuances of power and its application in a way that few devils did. She looked to her husband, who gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It will be difficult, Graphia said, her voice crisp and professional. But it may be possible to triangulate a point of origin. She closed her eyes, and a complex silver magic circle glowed in front of her. Data, maps, and lines of arcane text scrolled through the air. The silence in the room was absolute as she worked. After several long minutes, her eyes snapped open. I have a possible location. A remote, deconsecrated monastery in the Swiss Alps. The energy residue from their retreat is strongest there. It is likely a forward operating base. Then that's where we're going, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Absolutely not. Sears boomed, his authority reasserting itself. I will not sanction a full-scale invasion of a church facility by my sister's peerage. It's not an invasion, Naruto countered, his calm infuriatingly unshakable. It's a surgical strike, an infiltration and extraction mission. We go in quiet, we grab their leader. And we get out. No massive explosions, he said, pointedly ignoring his own recent duel, no declarations of war. Just a message. A very clear message that the House of Gremory is not to be trifled with. He looked at Rias. It's your call, your family, your home, your decision. Rias met her brother's worried gaze, then looked at the determined faces of her peerage. Kiba's hand was on his sword. Akino's eyes were crackling with suppressed lightning. Kaneko was clenching her small fists. Issei, for once, looked serious, the gauntlet of the boosted gear glowing faintly on his arm. They were scared. But they were ready. They were her family, and they would follow her anywhere. We're going, Rias said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. Grafia, give us everything you have on the location. Naruto will create the plan. We leave in 1 hour. Sears looked as if he wanted to argue, to forbid it, to lock her in her room until the danger passed. But he saw the steel in her eyes, the loyalty of her peerage, and the absolute, unshakable confidence of the shinobi who stood with them. He let out a long, heavy sigh of resignation. One condition, the Satan said, his voice grim. Capture, not annihilation. I want their leader for interrogation. I need to know how deep this goes. No one dies. Am I understood? Naruto smirked. I don't like killing people anyway. It's too messy. An hour later, they stood in a teleportation circle, not in their usual school uniforms or demonic battle armor, but in dark, practical combat gear that Naruto had insisted upon. He had spread a map of the monastery, provided by Grafia, on the floor and given them a rapid-fire, shinobi-style briefing. The monastery is built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by a dense forest. They'll have patrols, magical sensors, and watchers. Akino, you'll approach from the air, stay above the cloud cover. Your job is weather control. Create a localized, heavy snowstorm. Give us cover. Kiba, Kaneko, you're with me on the ground. We're the infiltration team. We move fast, we move silent. We take out the outer perimeter without raising an alarm. Issei, you and Rias are the main assault. Once we're inside, I'll create a diversion at the front gate. That's your cue. You hit them hard and fast, draw their main force, but keep it contained to the courtyard. Rias, you are the field commander. You direct the assault. Your job is to keep them busy. My team will use the chaos to infiltrate the command center and grab the leader. Non-lethal takedowns only. Use your power to disable, disarm, and disrupt. Any questions? There were none. His plan was simple, direct, and it played to each of their strengths. It was the plan of a seasoned commander, and it filled the with a confidence that their own head-on tactics never could. The teleportation circle flared, and they were gone, leaving Sears and Grafia alone in the library. You let them go, Grafia stated quietly. I couldn't have stopped them, Sears admitted, his gaze distant. He has given my sister something I never could. Not just power, but the will to use it. I can only pray he knows what he is doing. They arrived in the freezing, pine-scented air of the Alps, the monastery a dark, jagged silhouette against the moonlit snow. As Akino ascended into the clouds, the first flakes of a sudden, unnaturally intense blizzard began to fall. On the ground, Naruto, Kiba, and Kaneko became ghosts, shadows flitting between the ancient trees. Naruto's Sage Mode was a perfect counter to the Exorcist's sensors. He could feel the life force of every guard, every patrol, their positions laid bare to him like lights on a map. He moved with a deadly, silent grace, Kiba and Kaneko flanking him. Why were a blur of motion in the swirling snow. A guard post, manned by 2 exorcists, was neutralized before they even knew they were under attack. Naruto appeared behind one, a sharp chop to the neck rendering him unconscious. Kaneko, moving with a speed that belied her strength, did the same to the other. There was no sound, no alarm. They melted back into the blizzard, leaving 2 sleeping bodies in the snow. They reached the main walls. The diversion starts now, Naruto whispered, his breath pluming in the cold air. He formed a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In an instant, the forest was filled with hundreds of Narutos. With a unified battle cry, they charged out of the swirling snow, a chaotic, orange and black wave crashing against the monastery's front gate. Alarms blared. The gate was thrown open and dozens of white-robed exorcists poured out, forming a defensive line, their faces a mixture of confusion and shock at the sudden, impossible army that had appeared from nowhere. Now, Naruto hissed into his communicator. From the other side of the compound, a brilliant flash of crimson light erupted as Rias unleashed a controlled blast of destructive energy, shattering a secondary gate. Shi and Issei, his boosted gear screaming, "Boost! Boost! Boost!" charged into the courtyard, drawing the attention of the internal guards. The plan was working perfectly. The Stigma's forces were split, confused, and reacting to two different fronts. "Let's go," Naruto said to Kiba and Kaneko. They scaled the monastery wall with chakra-enhanced agility and slipped over the ramparts, unseen in the chaos. They moved through the stone corridors like wraiths, guided by Naruto's senses. He could feel the main concentration of holy power in the central chapel. That had to be their command center. As they approached, he felt a new, familiar presence. Griselda, the scarred woman from the attack. She was their commander on site. "She's mine," Naruto whispered. "You two, guard the entrance. Don't let anyone in or out." He kicked open the heavy chapel doors and stepped inside. Griselda stood before a massive, glowing communication circle, barking orders. She whirled around, her one good eye widening in shock as she saw him. "You," she gasped. "How did you find this place?" "You left a trail," Naruto said, walking slowly towards her. "Now, you and I are going to have a little chat. But first," he vanished in a burst of speed. Griselda, a veteran of countless battles, reacted instantly, her holy spear appearing in her hand to block his attack. But he wasn't attacking her. He paired beside the communication circle and slammed his palm onto it. A sage art, frog sabotage jutsu coursed through the holy magic, destabilizing and shattering it. Their line of communication to their high command was cut. "Now we can talk," Naruto said, turning to face her. "I have nothing to say to an abomination," she snarled, lunging at him with her spear. The fight was short and brutal. In the confines of the chapel, Griselda's wide, sweeping attacks were a liability. Naruto flowed around her, using the pews and the altar as obstacles and launch points. He didn't use Rasengans or clones. He used pure, precise taijutsu. He parried the spear with his forearm, the holy energy sizzling against his skin, and drove his other fist into her stomach. As she gasped for air, he disarmed her a fluid wrist lock and disabled her with a two-fingered chakra strike to the pressure points in her neck. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, completely paralyzed but still conscious. He slung her over his shoulder. The sounds of battle from the courtyard were already dying down. Rias's team had done their job. But as he stood in the desecrated chapel, Naruto felt it. A cold, piercing energy that had nothing to do with the exorcists. It was coming from beneath the floor, from a sealed crypt under the main altar. The entire monastery was a focus point, an ancient place of power. The chaotic clash of demonic and holy energy had been a catalyst, a spark in a room full of dry tinder. The stone altar began to vibrate. A thin, golden crack appeared on its surface, and a single tear of pure liquid light welled up and dripped onto the floor. The cold, static presence he had been sensing for weeks was no longer a whisper. For the first time, it felt like it was right here, in the room with him, waking up. "Time to go," he muttered, a new sense of urgency gripping him. They had kicked in the door, and in doing so, they might have just woken up something far, far worse than the hounds of heaven. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The cracking of the world. The feeling was absolute. It was not the malicious pressure of demonic energy, nor the searing righteousness of holy power. It was the immense, indifferent weight of a fundamental law of existence making its presence known. The air in the chapel grew thin and cold, and the very concept of shadow seemed to recede from the sterile, golden light emanating from the crack in the altar. It was a light that did not illuminate, it defined, rendering everything it touched into a stark, binary state of being or not being. Naruto felt Kurama stir within him, not with aggression. but with a deep, instinctual alarm. "Kit," the fox's voice was a low growl, stripped of its usual bravado. "This chakra, it's not life. It's the opposite. It's the principle of ending. Get everyone out, now." Naruto didn't need to be told twice. He slung the paralyzed Griselda over his shoulder and pressed his fingers to his communicator. "Abort mission. Code Black. Everyone to the primary extraction point, now." That is not a request. His voice, laced with a command authority that bordered on a sage's ki, cut through the chaos in the courtyard. In the swirling blizzard, Rias froze mid-blast. The urgency in his tone was something she had never heard before, a cold, sharp-edged panic from a man who had faced an immortal without flinching. "You heard him," she yelled to her peerage, her own instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. "Fall back. Disengage." They moved, pulling back from the battered and confused exorcists and racing towards the tree line where the teleportation circle was set to appear. They could feel it too, a strange lethargy seeping into their bones, their demonic power feeling sluggish and thick, like trying to run through water. Naruto, carrying Griselda, burst from the chapel doors. He saw Kiba and Kaneko looking towards the altar with wide, fearful eyes. "Move," he roared, and the spell was broken. They followed him, sprinting through the stone corridors. As they reached the courtyard, the phenomenon intensified. The entire monastery began to hum with a low, resonant frequency that vibrated deep in their teeth. Golden light, the color of pure, refined law, began to seep from the cracks between the stones of the ancient building. The snowstorm Akeno had created was now infused with shimmering, golden motes. And each snowflake that touched a devil's skin felt like a tiny spark of acid, not burning but negating. Akeno swooped down from the sky, her face pale. "Naruto-kun, the air itself feels wrong. My magic is being shredded." They reached the extraction point in the forest, a small clearing where Graphia's silver teleportation circle was struggling to form. It shimmered and distorted, the L-ness of its intricate formula fighting to hold their shape against the warping reality. "Graphia, what's the status?" Rias demanded. Her queen's voice came through the communicators, strained and laced with static. "My lady, something is interfering. The spatial coordinates are unstable. It's like the very fabric of the world is stiffening. I can't get a solid lock." The humming from the monastery grew louder. And from its central chapel, a pillar of pure, sterile, golden light erupted into the sky, punching a perfect, circular hole through the blizzard and the clouds above. The light was not hot, it was not destructive. But where it touched the sky, the perpetual twilight of the underworld seemed to erase, revealing a glimpse of a cold, star-filled void beyond. "It's waking up," Naruto yelled over the growing hum. "It's going to try and stop us." As if on cue, the ground between them and the flickering teleportation circle erupted. Tendrils of golden energy, not physical matter but solidified concepts of binding and stasis, lashed out from the earth. They didn't strike like whips, they simply appeared, their paths predetermined by an unassailable logic. One tendril shot towards Issei. "Look out," Kiba yelled, pushing him out of the way and taking the hit himself. The tendril wrapped around his leg, and Kiba cried out, not in pain, but in shock. His demonic sword birth, flickered and died, and the leg in the tendril's grip felt numb, cold, as if it had ceased to belong to him. "It's negating our power," Akeno gasped, launching a bolt of lightning that simply dissipated a few feet from the tendril. The teleportation circle flared brightly, then began to fade. "It's now or never," Graphia's frantic voice called out. They were out of time. Rias and the others were too far away, pinned down. The entity, whatever it was focusing on them, on their demonic nature. But it wasn't focusing on Naruto. To its senses, he was a chaotic anomaly, a thing of life and nature that didn't fit its neat definition of impurity. In that split second, Naruto made a choice. He dropped Griselda and flashed through a set of hand signs. Kurama, a tidal wave of crimson chakra exploded from him. But this time it didn't form a cloak or a weapon. He shaped it, forced it into the shape of a colossal, spectral fox head, its mouth wide in a silent roar. It wasn't an attack, it was a shield, a raw, desperate projection of pure life force. Sage art. Massive chakra barrier. He yelled, slamming his hands on the ground. The crimson fox head surged forward, meeting the lashing golden tendrils. There was no explosion. There was only a grinding, conceptual conflict. The tendrils of stasis and negation pushed against the barrier of raw, chaotic life. The golden chi fizzled and recoiled where it touched the red chakra, and the red chakra steamed and evaporated where it was touched by the gold. It was a stalemate. It was an antibody fighting a virus. Go. Get to the circle. I'll hold it back. Naruto roared, blood trickling from his nose from the sheer strain of maintaining the barrier against a force that was trying to unmake reality itself. Rias didn't hesitate. She recognized the sacrifice he was making, the opening he had created. Everyone, now. They scrambled past the straining, ethereal fox head, dragging the injured Kiba with them, and piled onto the flickering silver circle. Naruto, his muscles screaming, poured more and more of Kurama's chakra into the barrier, forcing the golden tendrils back another precious foot. Naruto, come on, Rias screamed, her hand outstretched. He dismissed the barrier in a single, explosive pulse that sent a shockwave of red energy rippling back towards the monastery. Using the recoil, he launched himself backwards. Using the flying thunder god technique to teleport to a kunai he had tossed near the circle moments before. He landed on the edge of the circle just as Graphia, sensing his arrival, poured the last of her power into the spell. The world dissolved into a vortex of silver light. The last thing Naruto saw was the monastery, now completely engulfed in a calm, silent, terrifyingly pure golden radiance. They had escaped, but they had left the door to the cage wide open. The Gremory dungeons were cold, damp, and magically silenced. Griselda Quarta, the paralysis wearing off and her body aching, was bound to a simple steel chair. Her holy power was suppressed by the demonic ambient energy of the room. She was defeated, a prisoner deep in enemy territory. And yet, she was sneering. Do your worst, devils, she spat, her one good eye burning with defiant hatred. My soul belongs to God. Your tortures are meaningless. Rias stood before her, flanked by Akeno. We are not going to torture you, Rias said, her voice cold and steady. We are going to ask you questions. And you are going to answer them. What was that thing in the monastery? Griselda just laughed. You felt it, didn't you? The coming of the purifier. The glorious end to your filthy existence. It didn't feel very glorious, Akeno said, her voice a dangerous purr as she trailed a finger charged with a small amount of lightning down the arm of the chair. It felt cold, empty. Griselda flinched but remained silent. The door to the dungeon opened and Naruto walked in. He dismissed Rias and Akeno with a gesture. They hesitated, then obeyed, leaving him alone with the prisoner. He pulled up a chair and sat down opposite her, his expression calm, his blue eyes holding no malice. Your commander, Marcus Valerius, Naruto began, his voice quiet. Conversational. He thinks I'm that thing, doesn't he? Or its host, an archangel of origin. Griselda's sneer faltered. Her shock was evident. He was wrong, Naruto continued. You and I both know that now. We were there. We both felt it wake up. You were camped on its front lawn, and you had no idea. You kicked a hornet's nest, and now the swarm is coming. Not just for us, for everyone. For the devils you hate, for the fallen angels you despise, and for the very humans you think you're protecting. He leaned forward, his calm more unsettling than any threat. Your faith, your mission, your entire world view just got flipped upside down. You thought you were serving God's will. But the thing you've just unleashed doesn't care about your God. It doesn't care about good or evil. It's a system restore. It's going to wipe the slate clean. And you, your commander, your entire stigma organization, you're on that slate. The defiance in Griselda's eye finally broke, replaced by a dawning, soul-crushing terror. She had felt it, the absolute, indifferent purity of that power. It was not the loving, righteous God she worshipped. It was something older, colder. What is it? She whispered, the question a surrender. That's what you're going to tell me, Naruto said. Everything you know, every piece of scripture, every apocryphal text, every rumor. Why? Our commander based his insane crusade on. You're not a prisoner of war anymore, Griselda. You're a survivor, just like us, and we have a very big problem to solve. Her shoulders slumped. The zealot was gone, replaced by a terrified woman who had just stared into the face of her own apocalypse. And she began to talk. She spoke of the often texts, a forbidden chapter of the Apocrypha that spoke of God's first failed attempt at creation, a universe of pure law and order, with no free will, no chaos. And she spoke of the instrument of that order, often, the Archangel of Origin, the cleansing protocol. An entity created to reset creation to its baseline state should it ever become too impure, too chaotic. Her commander, Marcus, had found a prophecy that the time of the cleansing was near, that often would awaken. When their sensors detected Naruto's anomalous, non-demonic power spike during his duel with Riser, Marcus, in his fanaticism, had become convinced that Naruto was Often's vessel. He had sent them to capture a god, but they had only succeeded in waking it. Upstairs in the library, Naruto relayed the information to Circex, Rias, and her peerage. A heavy, dreadful silence filled the room. A Genesis-level entity, Circex breathed, his face pale. An automated planetary cleansing system from a forgotten cosmology. This is a threat beyond anything we have ever faced. It's not a war. How do you fight a living natural disaster? All eyes turned to Naruto. He stood looking out the window, at the crimson sky of a world that was not his own, a world that was now marked for deletion. His quest to get home suddenly seemed like a small, selfish luxury. You don't fight the storm, Naruto said, his voice quiet but filled with a new, grim purpose. You find a way to stop the rain. He turned to face them. His expression set, his path clear. This started because they came for me. It woke up because of us. So we're going to be the ones to stop it. He was no longer a guest. No longer an ally of convenience. He was trapped here, and the world he was trapped in was about to end. His war had just found him, and it was a war for the right of this flawed, chaotic, and vibrant world to simply exist. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Heart of Chaos. The weight of Griselda's revelation settled over the Gremory library like a physical shroud, heavier than any silence. They were no longer dealing with a political rival or a band of religious fanatics. They were facing a cosmological failsafe, a divine purge program that had just been rebooted. The enemy wasn't a being they could fight. It was a fundamental concept they couldn't possibly defeat. Circex, for the first time since Naruto had met him, looked utterly lost. Everything we know, the Satan murmured, staring at a map of the underworld as if it were a relic from a dead civilization. Our magic, our society, the very essence of our beings, it is all founded on the principles of emotion, ambition, and chaos. Free will. To a being of pure, absolute order, we are not just enemies. We are a logical error. A flaw in the system that must be corrected. Before anyone could fall further into despair, the first reports began to filter in. Graphia's communication circles flared to life, one after another, painting a terrifying, rapidly escalating picture. In the human world, it started subtly. Strange. Pockets of extreme apathy were being reported in towns near the Alps. Entire populations were losing their drive, their ambition. Colors seemed muted, sounds were flat, and the vibrant, messy tapestry of human life was being ironed out. Crease by crease, into a dull, gray sheet. For the supernatural world, the effect was far more direct. A coven of vampires in Romania reported their powers of glamour and compulsion were failing. A pack of werewolves in the Black Forest found the full moon no longer stirred their blood. And in the underworld, low-level devils found their magic fizzling, their powers becoming unreliable and weak. Often's influence was spreading from the monastery like a stain, a wave of absolute order that unmade the unnatural, and the chaotic, simply by its presence. It's a plague of logic, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He had been quiet, absorbing the information, his mind working with the cold clarity of a battlefield commander. It's not attacking us, it's just overriding us. All eyes turned to him. In the face of a problem that had stumped one of the most powerful beings in their world, they all instinctively looked to the outsider, the anomaly. The one person who didn't fit into their world's neat little boxes. We can't fight the wave, he continued, echoing his earlier sentiment. We have to go to the source. The monastery. The thing that woke up in that crypt is its heart. We have to perform a different kind of surgery. That is suicide, Circex stated, his composure returning, replaced by a grim pragmatism. Yo, you saw what its mere presence did to my sister's peerage. To approach its core would be to willingly walk into your own erasure. Not for me, Naruto said, his blue eyes hardening. It didn't affect me the same way. My chakra, Kurama's energy, it's all based on life force. Nature energy. It's the very essence of the chaos it wants to eliminate. I'm an antibody to its poison. I can get close. You can't do this alone, Rias insisted. Stepping to his side, it was not a plea, it was a statement of fact. Her fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but her loyalty to him, to her family, was stronger. We will go with you. She is right, Hiba added, his injured leg now wrapped in a demonic brace. We started this together. We will end it together. Naruto looked at them, at Rias's defiant pride, Hiba's unwavering loyalty. Akino's dangerous smile, Kaniko's quiet strength, and Issei's terrified but resolute expression. They were a chaotic, mismatched, and beautifully imperfect family. They were the very thing Often was trying to erase. And in that moment, he realized his plan. You're right, he said. I can't do it alone. In fact, I'm the only one who can't do it alone. He turned to Searsex. That thing's power is pure, concentrated, order. You can't fight order with more order. You have to fight it with its opposite. You have to fight it with chaos. He jabbed a finger at the peerage. Destruction, seduction, ambition, loyalty, strength. Every one of you is a living embodiment of the beautiful, messy chaos that makes this world worth saving. That's our weapon, not my power, our power, all of it, thrown at its heart at once. A desperate, insane, and utterly shinobi-like plan began to form in Searsex's mind. A conceptual counterattack, the Satan breathed. Quote, to overload the system with the very error it is trying to correct. He looked at Naruto with a new, profound respect. But you will still need to get past its guardians. Guardians? Issei asked nervously. The stigma, came a quiet voice from the doorway. Griselda stood there, no longer a prisoner but a grim-faced harbinger, escorted by Graphia. Marcus will not have abandoned the monastery. He will see this transformation as a holy apotheosis. He will believe Often as an instrument of his God, and he will defend it with his life, and with the lives of every zealot loyal to him. And he has the Lance of Longinus. The name of the holy relic sent a chill through the room. Then we'll have to go through them, Naruto said, his tone leaving no doubt. He turned to Searsex. While we take care of the fanatics and confront the core, we need a diversion. A really big one. Can you give me that? Searsex's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for kings to act had come. I will give you a storm the likes of which the human world has not seen since the Great War, he promised. The skies above the Alps churned with an unnatural tempest. Crimson lightning, the signature of the House of Baal, clashed with the golden spears of light thrown by Michael and the seraphs of heaven. The shadows themselves seemed to coalesce as Azazel and the leaders of the Gregory arrived. Their dark power a stark contrast to the others. Searsex had made the call. He had revealed the nature of the Often threat, and in the face of universal extinction, old rivalries were cast aside. The leaders of the three factions had formed a desperate, united front, their combined power creating a massive buffer zone around the monastery, a chaotic storm of demonic, holy, and fallen power that slowed the spread of Often's orderly influence, buying Naruto's team precious time. Below this apocalyptic sky, Naruto and the Gremory peerage stood before the monastery. It was no longer a stone building. The entire mountain had been transfigured into a shimmering, golden ziggurat of impossible geometry. It was perfectly symmetrical, eerily silent, and radiated a cold that had nothing to do with the snow. Well, Issei muttered, his teeth chattering from more than the cold. That's not creepy at all. At the base of the ziggurat, a single entrance stood open, and guarding it were the last remnants of the stigma. At their head stood Commander Marcus Valerius, his face alight with ecstatic, mad devotion. In his hands, he held the Lance of Longinus, its gnarled wooden shaft pulsing with a silver light that could end a god. The impurities have come to defile the temple of the new Genesis. Marcus bellowed, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. They seek to halt the great cleansing. We are the final guardians of paradise. For the glory of God, you shall not pass. Your God has nothing to do with this, you fool. Rias shouted, her own crimson aura flaring. You've unleashed a monster that will destroy everything, including you. Blasphemy. Marcus roared. You cannot comprehend its glory. He pointed the lance at them. You will be the first to be purified. Rias, Issei, Akeno. Naruto commanded. You handle the grunts. Create a path for us. Kiba, Kaneko, you're with me. We're going for the head. The battle was joined. Rias's power of Dest. Ruction tore through the ranks of the exorcists, while Akeno's holy lightning and Issei's dragon shots created a wall of chaos that the stigma's rigid formations could not handle. Naruto, Kiba, and Kaneko moved as one. A blur of motion weaving through the battle lines, their target singular, Marcus. The commander met their charge, the lance of Longinus a whirlwind of silver death in his hands. He was a master combatant, and the holy spear was an extension of his will. Kiba's demonic swords shattered upon contact with it. Kaneko's powerful strikes were parried with ease. But they were a diversion. As Marcus focused on them, Naruto appeared above him, a Rasengan in his hand. Marcus, with a snarl of triumph, spun and thrust the lance upwards, aiming to impale Naruto in his attack. And then the impossible happened. As the tip of the god-killing spear met the swirling ball of life force chakra, it did not pierce it. It did not negate it. The Rasengan simply engulfed it. The holy power of the lance was just another form of energy to Naruto's sage art, and it was absorbed harmlessly into the vortex. The look of utter, soul-shattering disbelief on Marcus's face was more profound than any injury. His ultimate weapon, his symbol of faith, had failed. In that moment of shock, Naruto's fist, now bare, slammed into the commander's chest. The force of the blow sent him hurtling back into the golden walls of the ziggurat, where he collapsed, the lance clattering from his grasp. His faith, his world, his entire reason for being, had been broken. With their leader defeated, the remaining exorcists faltered, and they were quickly subdued by Rias's peerage. The path was clear. They stepped inside. The interior was a vast, silent, white space of shifting geometric patterns. At its center floated a perfect, crystalline sphere, pulsing with a calm, golden light. It was the heart of Ophan. As they approached, a voice echoed in their minds. It was not a sound, but a pure, direct transmission of thought. Less than logical error detected. Impurity, chaos, contradiction, analysis. You are flawed. You must be corrected. Greater than. We're not flawed, Rias said, her voice trembling but defiant. We're alive. Less than life is a system. The system requires order. Your existence is a deviation from the optimal parameters. Greater than. Then your system sucks, Issei yelled, his fear giving way to a surge of draconic defiance. Naruto stepped forward, placing a hand on the cool, crystalline surface of the core. Less than you. The anomaly. Your energy signature is unclassified. A variable outside the system. You will be the first to be erased. Greater than. No, Naruto said, his voice quiet, speaking both to the entity and to his friends. You're wrong. I'm not the one who's going to beat you. We are. He looked back at them. Now, give me everything you've got. All of it. Your anger, your loyalty, your ambition. Pour it all into me. They didn't hesitate. Rias placed her hands on his back, and her crimson aura of destruction, the very concept of things ending, flowed into him. Akeno added her power, the beautiful, violent clash of holy lightning and fallen darkness, the energy of a walking contradiction. Kiba channeled his unwavering loyalty, the speed of his devotion. Kaneko poured in her stoic strength, the raw, natural power of the earth. And Issei, with a roar, unleashed the power of the Welsh dragon, the infinite ambition to grow stronger, to protect, to rise. All of it, all their power, their will, their very souls, flowed into Naruto. He became a conduit, a vessel for the beautiful, glorious chaos of life itself. In his hand, he began to form a Rasengan. But it wasn't blue. It was a swirling, incandescent sphere of 1,000 colors, filled with flickers of memory, bursts of emotion, and the untamable energy of a dragon's roar and a devil king's pride. He pushed the sphere into the heart of Ophan. Less than irrelevant. Conceptual chaos cannot destroy pure order. Greater than. I'm not trying to destroy you, Naruto grunted, pushing with all his might. I'm giving you an upgrade. He poured his own essence into the sphere, his loneliness, his joy, his stubborn will, his unbreakable bonds, his love for his friends, both here and in the home he had lost. He was giving the system a soul. The pure, golden light of the core began to flicker. It was flooded with contradiction, with illogic, with emotion. The perfect, sterile system was being infected with the virus of free will. The humming intensified, not with power, but with confusion. The cold, logical voice in their minds screamed, not in pain, but in a paradox from which it could not escape. With a final, silent pulse that shook the foundations of the world, the light went out. The golden ziggurat dissolved, leaving them standing on a barren mountainside under a sky where the apocalyptic battle of the gods was slowly fading. The monastery was gone. The heart of Ophan was gone. The creeping wave of order had ceased. In its place was a single, tiny, golden seed, pulsing with a faint, warm light on the ground where the core had been. Naruto, exhausted, picked it up. It felt warm, and it hummed not with logic, but with a quiet, newfound curiosity. He hadn't destroyed the failsafe. He had given it something to think about. The war was over. The world was saved. Sirzex and the other leaders arrived, their faces etched with awe and disbelief. Marcus and the remnants of the stigma were taken into custody, their crusade over, their faith shattered. In the days that followed, a new world began to form. The three factions, bound by the shared threat, forged a genuine, lasting alliance. Griselda, granted a pardon, dedicated herself to being a bridge between the church and the demonic world. Naruto never found a way home. The dimensional tear he had come through was a freak accident, impossible to replicate. But as he stood on the balcony of the rebuilt Gremory mansion, watching the familiar crimson sky with Rias and the others, he found he didn't mind as much as he thought he would. He had lost one family, but he had found another. He was a stranger in a strange land, an anomaly, a variable outside the system. And he had taught this world, and himself, that was the best thing a person could be. He was the whirlpool in their crimson world, and his chaos was exactly what they needed. Chapter 10 End.